Welcome back to the Evolving Hunter podcast, where we talk with hunters, educators, conservation leaders, and everyday outdoors people about what it means to keep learning, keep improving, and keep showing up the right way. Whether you're brand new to hunting or still figuring it out, this show is about growing as hunters, sharing the lessons, and keeping the heritage moving forward. Let's jump into the show. And we're back. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. I say it every time. I'm thrilled that you're joining us. It's really cool to kind of watch the numbers on this young new baby podcast and see that we're gaining new listeners and more folks are interested in not just growing as hunters, but also growing as more thoughtful hunters, as growing as more involved participants in the hunting community. All that stuff really thrills me. I'm really excited about our episode today. Today we have joining us Morgan Evans from the National Wild Turkey Federation. She's the R3 and Relevancy Coordinator there for NWTF. So we're thrilled to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. So we've actually talked about NWTF quite a bit on this podcast and just kind of the NGO groups in general. So excited today to do a deep dive into NWTF, what they're doing, what kind of amazing programs they have out there for novice, experienced, all the above hunters and the conservation work that they're doing. So we're going to jump into all that a bit later, but I do want to get into the questions that we have this week. Again, another thing that I say frequently, I'm so thrilled when I get questions, right? Because it lets me hear from listeners and the thoughts that they're having, and it helps me make this show a better show, honestly. Because I went from like getting one or two questions to now I'm getting a fair bit more. So I see what people are thinking about and what they're wondering, and so it helps me kind of set things up in the future. But neither here nor there. Getting into hunting can feel overwhelming. Gear, safety, regulations, where to start, what to do next. That's exactly why we're thrilled to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. Certified Hunter gives new and returning hunters a clear, practical path into the field with online hunter education that is built around real preparation, not just checking a box. Whether you're taking hunter education for the first time or you're helping someone else to get started, visit CertifiedHunter.com and take the next step toward becoming a safer, more confident hunter. Again, that's CertifiedHunter.com. The first question, we have three today. The first one, I think is pertinent to our conversation because it's about turkey hunting. But it's from a listener named Nicole. She lives in Tennessee. And I'll read you her message. She actually wrote a longer message. I kind of pared it down a little bit. But she says, "Hi, Jay. I'm interested in turkey hunting this spring. But I keep wondering, what if I do all the work? I wake up early, I practice my calling, I go scouting hard, but I never even get close to harvesting a turkey. Can someone still call themselves a hunter if all they've collected is a bunch of bug bites?" That's a very clever line that you wrote there, Nicole. What if I only collect a bunch of bug bites? Morgan, you want to take a first crack at this question?
Yeah, I think, first thought is we are all in good community here because bug bites, ticks, very common conversation. And, ultimately, I think the whole point of, can I call myself a hunter? Absolutely. Like that's an easy answer there. I think the kind of meat behind that would just be hunting is a story, I feel like, interwoven into the experience that you have in the woods, whether it's with turkey or deer or squirrel or goose, whatever it may be. What you kind of come out there with is that open mind to experience the outdoors. And a harvest is always a bonus. And obviously, especially from a food providing perspective, that's what you always hope for an outcome. But most of my favorite parts of hunting come from the non-harvest perspectives and memories. So I would never shy away from calling yourself a hunter. Keep trying because it's not for the faint of heart. I know there's a lot of times where I start to wonder if I even know what I'm doing anymore. After being out in the woods for a couple of years, I'm like, I think I'm starting to figure this out, and then I get humbled again. So, yeah, you're in really good company.
Yes, for sure. Uh, I think it's funny. I had a conversation recently with someone who's been kind of in tune with the podcast. They were a guest recently, and they said, "You talk a lot about identity, Jay." And so I think I'm partly to blame for this question because I do. I feel like we do end up talking about identity a lot. Identity as hunters, identity as, all of the different things that we kind of hang the badges on ourselves and say, I am this, right? And
Mhm.
so I can understand this question, but at the root of it is, Nicole, you're out there doing all the things. You have the intentions to harvest a bird. So I don't think it really comes down to, can I now identify as a hunter? Whereas that's completely self-motivated. No one's out there checking your hunter, I am a hunter badge, right? They'll check your license, but they're not checking your, are you a real hunter badge, right? So that's not so much the thing, but the thing that you're doing, is again, goes back to, and this is a topic that's come up time and time again, is connecting a hunter to harvest, right? Where, that's a really challenging, in my mind, a really challenging proposition because most hunters go seasons, plural, right, without making a harvest. And even experienced hunters sometimes go seasons, plural, without making a harvest, right? It's just this is how things go. And so it's not so much attaching identity to harvest, it's attaching, what you're learning, how you're investing your time, your energy, your efforts, those types of things. And you're learning a ton, right? If you're out there practicing your calling and scouting hard, as you said in your email, then you're learning a ton, right? By whether it be one, just general calling, but also spending time in the woods, right? Those are all things that produce great outcomes in the end. And even if that outcome is just having fun in the woods, and that's okay. Cool. Thank you for sending your question in, Nicole. If you have follow-up questions or want to keep talking about it, send me another email to the same address. I am always happy to have a conversation. Okay, Morgan. I have my next two questions are kind of zingers. I'm not gonna lie, and I will also won't lie again. Is I have a propensity for zingers because if I just bring, like questions that are super easy, right? I don't feel as if we're like kind of tackling uh certain subjects. And not that I'm like here to tackle big topics in this podcast. I'm here largely to support new and novice hunters and provide information for anyone who's interested in hunting. But I do feel that there's value in having conversations about some of the harder things. So I have two for us. You ready? So this one, the subject for this email was, I like hunting, I don't like the culture. So of course that caught my eye. Again, I edited this down a little bit because it was a bit longer, but I feel like I got the gist of it. So this is from an individual, a listener named Aaron from Michigan. Aaron said, "Hello, Jay. I am interested in hunting, conservation, food, and being outdoors. What I don't like is what I don't like that I see in hunting is a lot of ego, gatekeeping, and people acting like they were born in camo." Another zinger from a listener. That's a great line. People act like they were born in camo. Uh, how can people grow in hunting while keeping? Sorry, I've forgotten how to read. How do we grow hunting without keeping the worst parts of the culture?
That's a great question.
That's a big question, Aaron from Michigan. So I would think that my take on this, I'm not going to say it's my initial take because I read this email before, is I could see and I understand why seeing things like that, where you maybe see gatekeeping, maybe see ego in hunting. And they did reference like almost like to the media, like that's kind of the media is portraying these things, and how that makes it challenging to grow hunting when what you see out there in the media world is all like really intense and ego and stuff like that. And so that was, I think, kind of the basis. Maybe I should have included that when I edited the question, but that was kind of the basis for it. And I certainly understand how that can be a thing. And I think that's even a part of like why this podcast came about, right? In that, I wanted to create something that wasn't about aspirational hunting, was really about, what the true experience for a new or novice hunter is, and the experiences they go through, kind of like Nicole in Tennessee. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like those kind of thought processes. And then when you look at media, you see these big flashy stuff. And I totally get that. But I think that one thing that's really important to consider here is that there are as many hunters in the world, and let's go smaller into the US, there are that many motivations in hunting. And so the content that you see may appeal to certain hunters, in which case that's working for them, right? Media companies would not necessarily be putting out and portraying themselves in that manner if it wasn't effective for them and their bottom line, at the end of the day. And so, I think that opens opportunities to find like communities that maybe share your motivations. You may not have or share the motivations of the hunters that you see in like popular media. But that doesn't mean that there's not communities out there that have motivations that are more in line with yours. And so I think a great way to do that is to be more involved in organizations or state agencies. Again, something else I probably say way too much in this podcast, but getting involved with your state agency, because I work in the hunting industry. I see hunting media. I work with state agencies. I work with NGOs like Morgan works with. So I can see the ego and the gatekeeping maybe from the media. I can understand that disposition, but I've never seen anything like that in working with state agencies or working with NGOs, things like that. Like the folks that are on the ground actually trying to actively help new hunters, that's just not a thing. And I even feel I'm going to be a little sensitive to it, and it's not a thing. So I think it's going out and finding your group, finding the people that don't necessarily share those dispositions, and really engaging with them. Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think, Jay and I are really privileged from the perspective of being in the industry. So we get to hear kind of some of the research coming out and surveys that are done. And I think one thing that I've learned through being a part of the industry is some of the research that's came out recently is the changing demographics in hunting, just showing the potential of kind of where we're moving. One thing, yeah, I think just seeing that there is this ever changing demographic and story and I guess quote unquote culture. I guess I don't really feel like I'm necessarily fit in the culture that you may see typically in stereotypical hunting as well, on media, but I love it. And I think that testimony that you bring with you, that you're passionate about, that you love your experiences, finding that and plugging that into community, whether it's like how Jay said with a nonprofit, and getting to kind of brainstorm with your agents, local state agency, local partners, whatever that may look like, or a local group of friends, and kind of starting to like make your stories known, and sharing that and welcoming other people into that fold, I think is the most impactful. I think anytime we get to tell stories, that only amplifies the voice of all of those that have, like Jay said, the different motivations. Because I think that's the coolest thing to me is like learning the different motivations, what draws people in. Yeah. And then we learn about like the different personas. I mean, like the research is really cool to dig into. I won't necessarily like, get into all the logistics with that, but I hope if anything that just encourages you that you're, I guess, coming from the industry, you're one of many, not one of very few, contrary to what it may feel like what you're seeing in media. But yeah, just know that like there is a growing demographic, just diversity to hunting, and it's really exciting to be a part of for sure. So I hope if anything that just encourages.
For sure. Yeah. about maybe taking a step away from hunting media. I'm not trying to disparage it, right? Like so often I feel like I do on this podcast, and I have to like really watch myself. But maybe just taking a step away from some of that and kind of connecting with real people, right? Connecting with people around you and hunting, I think would be beneficial for that. But thanks so much for sending in your question. I hope that was a good answer for you. I hope that's something that you can kind of take. You know, I feel like I didn't dance. I don't think it was danced around, but it's hard to directly answer
It's hard
that
to
in some ways.
quantify,
But
for sure.
yeah, it's hard to quantify for sure. Yeah, because it's so much of it is based on perception, you know, and your kind of your own understanding of what hunting is, so therefore that's the lens you see things through. But yeah, cool. But either way, thanks for sending in your question. I really appreciate it. All right, last one is from a listener out of Oregon. I did not edit this one. I thought it would be best to keep it in whole. So this individual said, "Hey Jay, been thinking about this a lot lately. I hear hunters say all the time that we need more hunters. We need younger people getting involved, and we need to protect the future of hunting and all that. I've heard you talk about it a lot on your podcast. But then when more people actually start showing up, crowded parking lots, more people on public land, tags get tougher to draw, spots get busier. A lot of these same people seem to get pretty mad about it. So here's what I'm wondering. Do hunters really want more hunters, or do we just like the idea of it until it starts to affect our own seasons? And if we do need more people involved for conservation in the future of hunting, like you've mentioned on your show, how do we deal with the fact that more people participating also means more competition?" That's a great question. It's $1 million question, to be fair. And I think the uncomfortable, a little bit uncomfortable truth about it from both sides, from those that are from hunters' perspective, as well as those folks whose careers are around recruiting new hunters, is that really both sides are real in that part. You know, yes, there are a lot of folks that talk about the need, and that need is genuine, for more hunters. Because they understand that hunting survives really solely through participation, right? More people coming to hunting is the more. I hate to make it like a dollars thing, but it does come down to that, right? More people come into hunting, and yes, it keeps the tradition alive more, but also it brings money into conservation, right? When people buy those tags and buy those licenses, and they buy those guns and ammo and their bows, all of that in turn comes around to provide funding, not just to continue hunting, right, but also for even non-game species, right, receives funding to help support habitat and conservation, et cetera. But even to like separate ourselves from the money side, and that more hunters, yes, it brings more conservation funding, but it also brings more political support for wildlife management. It brings more families carrying traditions forward. It brings a stronger public vote for access and habitat, right? And so it's one of those like a rising tide lifts all boats kind of a situation. But it's also true that a lot of hunters value hunting because it offers something that feels maybe a little more scarce now, right? Solitude and space and challenge and quietness and personal connection to wild places, things like that. And so when participation rises, those experiences I can see, and not I can see, they do come under threat, right? And so those crowded parking lots and those that pressure game, it kind of creates pressure. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think that this tension between we need more hunters and also more hunters mean kind of a degradation of the experience. I don't really see that as hypocrisy. I really see that as like competing values. And so, you know, at the end of the day, we want hunting to grow, but we also want quality experiences, right? We want more advocates, but we also want less crowding. We want traditions to continue, but we don't want our opportunities to diminish. And so it really comes like that struggle, that tug of war is a very, human conflict. So when hunters sometimes go wrong, I think, is blaming new hunters for those like structural problems. New participants are not necessarily the root of this problem. I think more so the root of this problem is loss of habitat, limited public access, fragmented land ownership, poor management of opportunities, population growth in general, right? Concentrations of pressure, we talked about earlier, of pressure through apps and social media and things like that. And then, at the end of the day, there's just fewer places to spread out and have your own space. So I think it comes down to the problem is not necessarily too many hunters, but it's really too little room and opportunity at times. So if we're trying to think about like how do we create a path forward in that, and trying to ride that line between like recruitment and experience quality, I think it comes down to improving a few things, right? So through like better access, so like opening land, like walk-in programs, easements, things like that. Better retention of hunters through like mentorship and or other programs, because ultimately hunters who learn ethics and stewardship and things like that, they create like a healthier culture, and I think even promotes like greater land access, right? Because if hunters in mass are really doing their part in being good stewards of the land, it can't hurt into finding more ways to open more land. And then I think obviously it comes down to habitat investment and opening areas, right? Distributed opportunities at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, some hunters may say they want more hunters what they really mean is they want more hunters who don't hunt where I hunt. And so it's a real balance. But also at the end of the day, while understandable, that is not sustainable, right? Like, if we look historically over time at hunter numbers and how they've diminished, it depends on how far you look back, but there's significant decline if we look back really far, right? If we look year to year, it's a little bit, but those little bits add up over time. So I can't say here's the answer because all of us are also thinking about this answer. I think, those who work in the R3 world, access is going to be a larger and larger topic, over time as we move forward. Because to say, well, just expand access is a much, much, much easier thing to say than to actually do, because it comes down to federal and state dollars. It comes down to having the support to do so, and the impacts that may have on wildlife and people's public perception of hunting. Like there is no single pill that can be taken to alleviate the issue. But when it's all said and done, we need these hunters coming in, new hunters, to replenish hunters who are aging out. We know that there's a lot of hunters aging out, right? In the next 10 years, let's say, right? We're on a lot of our hunters are over 65 and older. And so as they begin to, maybe not being able to get out in the woods so much, we need someone to replace those hunters. And so it's not always going to be a comfortable truth, but we're going to have to bring more people in because to allow us to support conservation. If you listen back a few episodes ago, we had an episode with James Burnham from the Office of Conservation Investment with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we talked very heavily, the whole episode was about how conservation is funded in the U.S. And that's a great, if you're interested in where this money comes from, this amazing system that we have that funds conservation, like possibly the best in the world, it is driven off of participation. So I won't lie, I kind of feel like I rambled there a little bit. It's a big question when it's all said and done. So that's the best I could think. But it honestly comes down to just if you really care about hunting, and I'm not questioning people's, passion for hunting, but if it all matters to you, like you should also be an advocate for new hunters and helping to support new hunters and being a mentor and helping with NGOs and state agency programs, right? Because those things really do move the needle as it relates to hunter recruitment and towards supporting the future of conservation in the United States. Whew, that was a
Wow,
mouthful.
that was
Anything
incredible.
to add to that?
I think, a lot of times when I think about this question, I mean, you hit on so many key points and conversations that are had because, I mean, oftentimes, anytime we talk about recruitment in the same breath, almost, it's guaranteed that access is going to come up. And
Yeah,
I mean, that's the beauty of where we've seen this growing research kind of department or kind of segment within conservation called human dimensions. And that's just truly trying to figure out how do we balance conservation and habitat needs for wildlife while matching the needs and the demands of our growing population. So we
yeah,
have that balance between the two, and it's going to be a tension. Like it's going to be something we have to learn and adapt to. And that's for from a species management side all the way to a hunting pressure side as well. And, we have different regions that are going to see it in different ways reflected. I mean, we have some states that are primarily privately owned, and that's going to be a unique uh, approach to the access question and that pressure. And then you also have expansive public lands, but you have areas that are going to be way more popular than others because that's where the species are, and
yeah,
that's where you want to hunt. And so that's where you're going to see a lot of the friction beginning to fester there. But yeah, I think the biggest thing that just comes to mind is like giving grace. I oftentimes have to go back to the drawing board and be like, I was new at one point too. And even if like you come from a family line of hunters and you were introduced at a young age, you were still new at some point and you still had to
mhm,
learn the ropes. And, I try to think of like, it isn't like we want to cap how many hunters we can have at a certain point because who do you want to tell no? I surely wouldn't have wanted that to be the cutting point for me whenever it came to the time when I was starting to hunt. And so I wouldn't want that for anyone else because I know how monumental and how life changing it is. And so I think that's one thing we talk a ton about within the organization, just R3 as a whole, is like we know the impacts and the inspiration and the passion behind it to be involved in hunting and how absolutely transformational those experiences can be. So I think that's where I have to come through the lens of like when we are working through that tension point of like, how do you balance? It's like, yeah, there's patience and there's grace in the new and grace in the figuring it out. Cause I mean, I didn't walk onto public land. Personally, I did not grow up with the need. I guess I had private land access, thankfully, for my first 18, 20 years of life, and then moved away and entered the public land space. And that was absolutely all new to me. And I had a learning curve there. And I was a hunter already, but I probably definitely didn't come across as being a hunter at that given point when I first accessed public land. So I just think about it from that point of, I think, like you said, Jay, it was perfectly said of, I think a lot of times the newbie in the area is the one that gets the pressure. But I think there's other avenues and places to invest your time to try to advocate for, whether it's access. And we talk about access from a range perspective, from a social perspective, from
yeah,
land management and access. Because you can also say, like, we have access, but if it's not where the species is, then that's not going to make any difference whatsoever. So I think people don't understand, like, the power of political advocacy, and that's working with your NGOs, your state agencies. I mean, we can hammer that home all day long. But
yeah,
that's like you have a voice and get to have an impact. And yeah, I just think like funneling when you see something that needs to be addressed to the helping out with the parties that are trying to advocate for that too, rather than honestly like the new person on the block that's trying to learn how to hunt. That's just an after effect. Like that's not the source of the problem per se. So I don't know. It is it's going to be a tension. It's going to be something we continue to discuss. And I don't know that there's a silver bullet, unfortunately.
no, this could be its own podcast. Like this
Right.
one question
Absolutely.
we could dive into that. And I feel like my perceptions or, um, I guess viewpoints have changed over years with this. Like, this question has always been talked about, and I'm willing to say that probably even back in the day, right, whatever date that is, they were probably still having this conversation, even though it was very different, right? Because it's all
Mhm.
about perception. If you're used to going to a trailhead and it being just empty, and then
Mm-hmm.
you go to a trail one day and there's someone else there, emergency, right? We're
Right.
too full. And so now when you go and there may be 10 vehicles there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just different. But my perception back in the day used to be to this question was kind of like dismissive, honestly. It's like, well, just hike a little farther, right? Yeah. If you're wanting to hunt 100 yards from the dirt road, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people there. Just put your hiking boots on and get in there, go to places that are more difficult to access. But I've come around, right? that,
Mm-hmm.
like that is not representative of access for all, one, and two, it's challenging for sure, and it's something that is really difficult to navigate because I make sure this statement is true before I say it. I have never hunted on public land. I've never hunted on private land. I've only ever hunted on public land,
Wow.
and so that was a huge learning curve. Like when I first started, just like navigating okay, that guy's over there. I don't want to disturb them. How do I, it was a lot of learning curve in that time, and still is, honestly. Every time you go somewhere new, you're encountering new topography, new people, even, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's like real norms in some public lands on how you operate, and that changes. When I moved from Pennsylvania to South Carolina, I love South Carolina, not disparaging it, but we don't have a ton of public hunting land. Whereas in Pennsylvania, I could drive 10 minutes from my house in either direction to be in state game lands and be in thousands of acres. And it was just tons and tons of access. Not the case here. And so I'm still learning, honestly, how to like what's what and what's where and how to navigate that. So it's all part of the process.
Yeah,
Cool.
like you said, sorry, we might be moving on.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
No, I think it's just whenever you start with the thought of being new to public lands, I know for me, there's such a learning curve on that aspect of, like you said, the traditions or maybe even the unspoken rules of public land or the
Mm-hmm.
ethics, the kind of standards behind that. And I think being new to that, that's also so intimidating. And a lot of times, if it's not told to you, you don't know. Even just like in the sense of how you were talking about when you walk in, it's like, how do I respect the other hunter that's already set up, or is we both got there at the same time and we're both headed towards the same spot. How do we negotiate that? How do we discuss through this? And I think oftentimes we see some of that pressure, especially amplified. I mean, it sounds like common sense, but around a lot of our more urban hubs,
Mm-hmm.
people are looking for an access point that they can get to relatively quickly because we don't have the most ample time. We want to get out there and maximize our time hunting. And so, yeah, like you said, I definitely would be naive to be like, oh, but there's so much public land. Like it'll be okay. But then once you get, like, for example, I had moved out to Nebraska and I was in Lincoln area for school and I was like, I'm ready to go hunting. But within an hour, like you're kind of limited of really where you want to get to. And the idea of moving farther out from that takes more of an investment. So you're going to see that crowd within that closer
Yeah.
relative area. And so the more people, the more conversation you're going to have around it. So it is interesting and it's a hard one to balance for sure. But it's definitely makes it all part of the journey.
Yeah.
Adds character to
Absolutely.
it.
For sure. For sure. Well, thanks for sending in your questions. If you would like to have your questions answered on the show, please reach out to me. You can email me at community@evolvinghunter.com. That's COMMUNITY @evolvinghunter.com. I'm always thrilled to get your questions. All right. Let's jump into talking about NWTF and Morgan. So,
Sounds
to kind of to kick us off, for those who may not know you, this is a very broad question. Who are you? What's your role with the National Wild Turkey Federation?
Wow, yeah, we could go so many different avenues with that. Yes, my name is Morgan Evans. I have been with National Wild Turkey Federation for this month, going on 4 years. So it has been quite the journey. I originally grew up in North Carolina. I grew up on some ag land mixed with family land and got to grow up hunting with my dad and his group of buddies. And so from an early age, I was introduced to the turkey woods, the deer woods, was out there every spring and fall, any amount of time I could get out of school, I was there. But kind of in a unique perspective of I grew up and I was the only girl hunting, but I never thought any different because that's just how it started and how it kind of had continued. And I didn't really grow up with that many um, friends whose parents also hunted. So I just thought it was normal of like, oh, well, they don't hunt. So that's why my girlfriends didn't hunt growing up. And then I went away to school and got to go to North Carolina State University and double majored from stemming from the passion of being part of the ag and the hunting world. I double majored with agricultural sciences and fisheries and wildlife biology. And so it was just this perfect blend of getting to see how conservation and our landscape go hand in hand and how important management is for our landscapes and vice versa. Just even that's where it started to introduce that human wildlife dynamic and conflict that grows with an urban world. And so all that to say, just became very passionate about the information I was learning in school and being like, man, that would be so beneficial for those that I like grew up with around home, like whether they're farmers, whether they're hunters, like how they can be contributing or maybe learning some of the science behind why things are happening or how they could better manage to see the outcomes that they were hoping for. And so really that's where I was like, oh, I love working with people, but I also love the outdoors. So how do I bridge that gap? And, naturally as it did, COVID happened, I'd started working for the state agency, actually going the fisheries direction. Fun story with that. I had been given the nugget of wisdom in school of like, if you love a certain type of hunting, probably go into the research field or the like career field of an opposite species. Because if you're studying the species you love, you'll probably be busy during that season and so you won't get to hunt as much. So naturally I was like, well, I'm going to be a fisheries biologist so I can be out in the woods. So jokes on
Is
me, that
fish
didn't
the
happen long
opposite of
term.
turkey?
Huh? Yeah.
Is fish the opposite of turkey?
I don't know. Definitely like thought I would get at least a little bit of leadway there, which was true for my time period there because I spent a lot of summers out in the water. But when it's cold, you can only go but so long in a wetsuit, and then you just you start doing
Sure.
data from the computer for couple months. But yeah, naturally, as COVID happened, I kind of put a pause on some of the research and work I was a part of. And so an opportunity had come about at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln to go work on some research regarding kind of bridging that gap between agriculture and fisheries and wildlife. And so I studied natural resources for my master's. I got to work with conservation specialists and talk to them about their knowledge and comfortability around precision ag and communicating conservation efforts from an agricultural perspective, and really just tried to build that framework and that storytelling of how do we start to train up and continue those conversations to bridge that gap between ag and natural resources. And so it was an awesome experience, opened a lot of doors, a lot of really cool conversations to where, as I again was closing out my research there, I was like, anything I can do to be outside more and get to have these conversations, I would love to do that. And so, alas, I started looking back in my undergrad years. I had worked with NWTF as a college chapter, and that connected me with some of the chapters all across the state where they would host events or have fundraising events, whatever that may look like. And they would ask some of the college students to come get involved and kind of be a part of what they were doing and the mission that they had they were investing in. And so I just got to see from like a grassroots level the passion and the community built within that. And so naturally, as I'm writing my thesis and I'm a little burnout on writing for the day, I was like, I'll just look for some jobs, just trying to get familiar with what's on the landscape, what might be within the scope. And I was like, I wonder what jobs they have offered. And Michigan R3, the recruitment, retention, reactivation coordinator position that NWTF has, where they uniquely will partner with the state agency and with NWTF. So you're kind of like a dual employee. Was opening up. And so in the back of my head, I was like, this is too good to be true. Like, I'm not quite defended my thesis yet. So I don't know if I'll be able to, sneak into this position, even if I were to be considered, because I'm still a little short of my master's. Then I was like, I don't know, like, going from North Carolina to Nebraska was quite a cold transition. I was very unfamiliar with snow. So that was snow, wind, tornadoes, all that, very new stuff to me. And so then naturally, as I was applying for the Michigan job, I was like, I'll just do it just to get familiarity with the organization, with the industry. What does an R3 position look like? But I don't think I can move any farther north. That was my mindset going into the interview. And I jumped on the call, and man, like, one, matched with passion, but two, it's just finding the people you want to work with that are equally as passionate and just like welcome you in with open arms. And that was my team, which I'm so thankful to still be working with Teresa Carroll and Mandy Harling within the education outreach department. I just literally left the call after the first interview and I walked out. I was at my apartment with a friend and she was like, how'd it go? And I was like, if they offer me the job, I'm taking it. I'm moving to Michigan. And as things naturally would occur, I got offered the job and was able to negotiate finishing up school and then heading out, and started there, and now have transitioned. I was in that role, getting to put on education outreach events within Michigan. So our question earlier was very timely coming from a Michigan standpoint. Like, love Michigan, have such a big heart for it. And especially we have a R3 position still there doing work on the ground. And we ask that question every day of how do we build up a new culture and invite others into that in that state as well as many others. But yeah, very near and dear to my heart, Michigan is. And I was there for about 3 years, was in the position about a year and a half of that. And then a position opened up from a national perspective to come internal fully with NWTF. And as the title R3 and Relevancy Coordinator kind of denotes, I get to work with anything from curriculum development and resources for our volunteers and our chapters that are doing R3 events, to working with partners, working on grants to try to help open up more opportunities for individuals to try new programs, try new events, get a funding for events. And then I get to work with communications. And I think we touched on it a little earlier, just like sharing your testimony, sharing your story. I get to do some of that and sharing out what's going on across the nation, and just getting to really amplify those voices, which is just so cool. And it's inspiring. It's like what keeps you, like, every day when you walk in and you read a new story and you're like, oh man, like, this is awesome. This is what you're here for. So that's a little bit of me and how I got into my role. It's always new, a little different every single day. But that's what keeps it fun. And that's what, I get to work with people that I went to undergrad with and grad school. And sometimes there's research, sometimes there's conservation, sometimes it's event planning. And so I think that's the beauty of working in conservation, is there's a lot of different factors to it, but I absolutely love it.
Hey folks, Jay here. Just taking a short break from the show to let you know about something that I am really excited about. My first few times chasing turkeys, I wasn't learning. I was just repeating the same mistakes, but just in different woods. Hearing birds, getting close, and then blowing it without really knowing why. That can be a really frustrating part about turkey hunting. It's not always obvious what you're doing wrong. As you know, we are proudly partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. Their hunter education course is designed to help you learn how to safely get out into the woods as a hunter with confidence. But they've also just started developing courses to help you learn more about hunting specific species. I had the honor to help them to develop their newest course called Turkey Hunting Fundamentals. This online course is designed to help bring clarity to turkey hunting, how birds move, how to set up on them, when to push, when to sit tight. All that stuff can actually really change outcomes. So if you're new or if you're just tired of guessing, I promise you it's worth your time. If you want to check it out, go to certifiedhunter.com/courses to get started. All right, let's jump back into the show. I love to hear people's stories, and you and I have we work in the same industry. We've known
Yeah.
each other for years and have
Yeah.
worked together in different capacities in the past. And
Mhm.
I didn't know that was your backstory. That's really cool. Cool to hear
Yeah.
those kind of stories. So you've been hunting most of your life, right? Growing up in a
Yeah.
hunting family, and I always find this fascinating with when I get a chance to talk with folks who started very early, because I was the opposite. I started very late,
Mhm.
uh, in that how your uh, thoughts and ideas, perceptions, viewpoints on hunting. Could you identify? This is a big question, but could you kind of identify like, how those may have shifted over time as you've gone from, hunting with your family to
Yeah.
becoming maybe more independent hunter to now you're in charge of R3 net relevancy for the whole nation with NWTF, right? I mean, that's a big,
Mhm.
that's a big spectrum. Uh,
Yeah.
can you kind of pinpoint a few things that really kind of shifted for you over time?
Yeah, yeah. There's, I mean, so many ideas and perspectives come into play here. From a initial standpoint, growing up, it was just a way to connect with my dad, with my family.
Yeah,
Definitely a community aspect, and words like heritage and tradition definitely come into play there. And it was just fun. Like, I mean, as a kid, like, what better than to just get to go spend time outside and learn? I mean, I was the kid that was like, I'm going to be a veterinarian. Like, I'm going to help save all the animals in the world, which sounds, I know, very ironic. That was something I definitely had to learn and come to understand was the management side of hunting and conservation, because
sure.
there was definitely that point of influx or tension where I was like, oh, like, I really like to go hunting with my dad, but I am killing something if I want to like ultimately save these animals. And like, where does that balance come into play? So yeah, I think that was some things that I got to develop very early on as, conservation, stewardship, management, all of these different ideas and kind of understanding how they all come into play. And just respect for the land. I think that's grown. And I mean, we talked about earlier of like what is considered a hunter and when can you be defined as a hunter. And I think that was
Yeah,
something where I probably grew up just thinking like when we talk about like born in camo kind of idea, like I mean, I don't know what age I started wearing camo by any means, but it was just like, it was just a way of life. It was something that people just did around. I mean, when you grow up with like farmers around you, it's very common, but, um, I think as I grew older, I definitely reshaped what that definition looked like, especially for me. I mean, going off to college and especially moving halfway across the country. I mentioned earlier that, I grew up primarily having private land, whether it was my family's own or family and friends. Um, to then kind of have to reorient and figuring out like what does that look like to hunt on my own, or find a new community, and that community doesn't necessarily look the same as what I grew up with. I grew up with those that had done it their whole life, were very comfortable. Any questions I had, honestly, like relearning the confidence of how to call for a turkey, or how to climb up into use a climbing stand by myself, like not having someone around to be like, am I doing this right? Like that
yeah,
confidence, really leaning on my prior knowledge or my capabilities to learn. Like I remember I loved archery, but had always had someone helping. Like I did some FFA hunting, teams and shooting teams rather. And growing up, and you always had like a coach or someone to ask the question to you. So when I got out to Michigan, got out to Nebraska, and started trying different aspects, and was like, okay, I'm ready to turkey hunt. I'm ready to take someone turkey hunting. That was a big one where I was like, am I actually equipped to do this?
yeah,
That was humbling to learn, like, hey, like you don't have to know everything to be able to take someone hunting. Like there's also grace and there's also a welcoming spirit to be like, hey, I don't know everything either. Like we're going to figure this out together. But I remember just like walking into Michigan, like someone was like, hey, as like a welcoming gift, like I want to get you some new arrows for your bow since you're like back into archery. And they were like, what length are your arrows? And I was like, I don't know.
well, that
Absolutely.
won't.
Yeah, it's like, and they're like, what's the length? And so, even just like, this is such a small thing, but like how encouraging it was, like, go watch a YouTube video, read some articles on how do you do that, which is now I look back and I'm like, it's a very small hurdle to have overcome. But it was those little things where it's like, I never had to think about that.
Yeah,
And I mean, yeah, like when you talk about moving into a professional role like that, that's a whole nother level of imposter syndrome, especially when they're like, yeah, you can go out and teach, you're leading a mentor hunt, or we're doing wing shooting, or I'm teaching someone who's never touched a gun how to shoot. And by the end, their anticipation is they're going to be hitting a couple clays. And I'm like, I'm not that great at wing shooting. So I learned very quickly how, just like the technical skills and the level of being able to teach and encourage and mentor does not necessarily have to directly correlate with your success as a hunter yourself. Not to say that there isn't like benefits to both, but I did not have to kill a turkey last spring to be able to teach someone else how to turkey hunt, because the
You don't
lessons
have
I
to like file it with NWTF, right? Like I killed a turkey. I'm employed for the next year.
yes, yes, correct. Yeah, I think like, you really learn to like lean on, like every time I'm out in the woods, it's like, oh, what am I learning from what I did well, but also what did I learn really poorly to make sure that I teach that so that someone else doesn't make that same mistake. So that's really just reframed how I see myself as a hunter, or how to hunt, or just my approach to it too, because I also hear so many stories now, and get so many insights as to what's going well, what's not, where people are struggling, where a major hindrance is. And so I get to kind of walk in other people's shoes oftentimes
Yeah.
too, and kind of say like, oh, like, yeah, this was really easy for me this time, but I know that's not always the case. Or I know that research says that there's these declines and I need to be aware of that from a management standpoint. There's so many factors that I get to think about, where when I sit down in the woods, I'm like, it may not have been as simplistic as it was when I was like growing up, but it's such a privilege to be able to know all of that, to be able to see more of like almost like the weight and the gift that it is to be able to sit in the turkey woods or go hunt for a deer or something like that. So um, it's a mixed bag for sure. There's so many different factors, but I definitely can look back, and I'm now back in North Carolina. This is my first year back, and so just kind of reacquainting with the area and being like, oh wow, like I'm sitting in the same field, but like my perspective is so different, or even I'm like how I'm approaching hunting is so different now. So it is really encouraging, but kind of crazy to be back in full circle moments for sure.
Yeah. Did you move back to like your hometown?
I did. So I'm like
That's
back in
crazy,
this.
isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like right next to family. And after moving away and kind of we welcomed our first kid and started out, being away. I mean, we were the closest family we had was 8 hours away. So to start out that way and now to have them next door is just the most encouraging thing. But to be able to be like, hey, does someone want to go watch the kid while I go hunting is such a gift, because that was definitely one of those things where I was like, I don't know that I'm ever going to get to hunt again until they're old enough to come with me. So there's a whole dynamic there that I'm having to relearn too.
Yeah. We have like a very similar story. Uh, I went and moved away from home and kind of, chased the career thing. I moved around the country, for jobs and things like that. And then when we had a kid, my wife and I, we ended up coming back to my hometown and moved like 4 doors down from my childhood home.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been here 2.5 years and,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not, maybe almost 2 years. It still blows my mind sometimes. Like, man, this is just like
Yeah.
blast from the past, because
Yes.
you kind of, you move on and you don't really think about it. And then you come back and it's just like, man, things are still the same or still not, or not the
Yeah.
same, whatever the case may be. It's kind of trippy a little bit, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, definitely trying to figure out that distinction between like past and present and how that all morphs together is definitely very unique.
Yeah. And
It's hard to put a finger on it.
you have perceptions of who you are in locations.
Right.
And when
Right.
I left South Carolina at 18, really, I was
Yeah.
very different than I am returning in my late 30s.
Right.
So, it's, you kind of, you see things differently. But,
Yes.
uh, so re- as it relates to NWTF, I feel like it's like a household name. Like a lot of people know the name NWTF, but can you kind of give us the explanation of what NWTF is in more practical terms?
Yeah. National Turkey Federation. Glad that it comes across as a very household name. It is a nonprofit. Obviously, with that connotation of focusing on the wild turkey, but just passionate about getting people outdoors. We talk about it being like the life changing power of the outdoors is kind of our go to saying with that. But our mission ultimately is the preservation of our hunting heritage and the conservation of our wild turkey. And so I said that I will flip flop conservation of our wild turkey, preservation of our hunting heritage. But ultimately, that's just like, that's my favorite part. And that's the thing that we love to just advocate and share is that we're passionate about not only conserving and working towards habitat management and conservation, but just as nestled into that and as important in our organization is getting people outdoors and getting them to experience that outdoors piece. It's a part of our mission. Both sides of the mission is impactful and they come together in obviously such easy ways, like they intertwine so naturally. But being on that education and outreach side and just getting to advocate for people getting to experience this. And, you know, Jay, you and I have talked about before is like, we're not necessarily convinced that every single person is going to love and like want to be a full blown hunter. And we don't also expect that every person's going to be a wild turkey hunter. They may, you know, find their area and comfortability with deer or duck, but to know that as long as we're making an impact on the habitat to ultimately bring all the wildlife that we love to whether hunt or just see on the landscape. Because I mean, when we talked about earlier, to be a hunter is just to experience the outdoors and get to enjoy it. We love having people of all backgrounds and interest levels a part of the organization. So I think we have around 250,000 members, and it goes across the
Couple
nation.
members.
Just a couple, yeah.
Just a couple.
It's which I think that is in the absolute coolest thing is, so we have a national convention every year in Nashville. It usually falls around Valentine's Day weekend. And we have individuals that travel from across the nation that come to be a part of it. And we do some like breakout meetings and trainings and sessions aside from like the fundraising and the celebrating and the expo and all that. We get to meet with these individuals that are putting on the education outreach events, that are passionate about learning more about hunting, that are doing kind of these grassroots efforts. Because if there's one thing we can advocate for within our nonprofit and within NWTF is our volunteers is the heart and soul of the organization. Nothing from the conservation and habitat enhancement and access and conservation perspective, as well as our events that we host every year. None of that happens without volunteers. And so we get to celebrate with them, hear their stories. But you truly like get a family like feel from it. Like the first year, it was just like pure shock. Like, how does this even come about? Like, how are all these people, you know, able to connect over such a cool thing as hunting or wild turkey and conservation? But now it's like going back every year. It's like, oh man, like that's so cool to sit back and reflect and be like, I know people from every state that are passionate about the same aspect and to find that commonality. And there's people that like I would have never met otherwise had it not been for this, you know, one connecting piece. So I think that's like that beauty of an organization that is volunteer based, but also nationwide is like you get to have that full scope. And there's so many different like avenues that we get to play a part in, from policy to event partnership with agencies and federal partners and industry partners, to our conservation, like acquisitions that we're working on. And I mean, we do anything from water to soil to forestry. I mean, it's so cool to see the different avenues, and you kind of like can get lost in trying to tell the full story. But I think that's the beauty in it too, is conservation is just so immense. So I guess that's a little like kind of like foreshadowing or like hindsight into the organization. But yeah, I think I could, like we were talking about, that could be a whole podcast just trying to explain the ins and outs of NWTF, which is really an honor.
Yeah. And you certainly touched on this, but I kind of want to dive a bit deeper. If people look at NWTF and they think that it's an organization, you know, quote unquote, just about turkeys,
Mm-hmm.
what are they missing?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest things we talk about nowadays is like stewardship, and how do we connect people to the land. And so whether that's because you are wanting to participate in citizen science, and the research going on with wild turkeys because you love seeing them on your property, every year, We get to have those aspects of working with local universities across the country. We host R3, or not R3, research symposiums, where we get to invite researchers from across the country to talk about where are we seeing trends for the wild turkey, because I think that's one of the biggest things is the success story of the wild turkey. I think when we talk about not necessarily just being a turkey hunter, I think the one thing that most of us, if we have any connection to the outdoors, is just wanting to see the continuation of those species, but also that habitat to continue. And everyone wants to see that success story. And I think a lot of times, unfortunately, we can get inundated with some of the negative and the hard stuff going on. But, um, you know, back in the 60s, 70s, going into the 80s, we had we had a massive decline. I mean, you hear standardly across the board with hunting, there was over hunting and non-regular or no regulations towards hunting, to where we saw a population crash of the wild turkey to where it had diminished in most states. And that's kind of where the passion behind NWTF started. And we had volunteers dig in and work with our state agencies and federal partners to help relocate turkeys to different areas to reintroduce them. And now we have turkeys all across the country. And it's one of the coolest conservation restoration stories. And so that's really where like our heart comes from, is like seeing that win and now learning how with that restoration side, how do we maintain that and how do we work on conservation management to try to balance and figure out through research how we can maintain those populations. And so there's so much to that of the passion and the heart behind just like stewarding our wildlife, stewarding our habitat well for the greater purpose rather than not just for hunting. So I think that would be something that I would not want to be lost on anyone. But I think also the community part that, I reflect on that some with convention, but also, I mean, our education and outreach events host over 1,000 events every year. And if you think about that from a scale of 1,000 is already a big number, but then you think of all the individuals that are participating in that and they're all at local levels, how that's bringing together communities that have maybe so many other backgrounds, so many different career paths and involvement in the outdoors, but they're all able to come sit down at a table or host this event to bring others in and have those conversations about what can we do locally? How can we help steward the land that we have? Or when we talk about going back to like access conversations, like what can we be doing to support that in our local communities? We just get to see so much influence at that grassroots level that I think is so powerful that you don't get just, doing something independently. So it's really just finding that way to like weave those stories together to make a greater purpose and impact. And so, yeah, obviously the hunting piece isn't a very much so added bonus. But honestly, when you start to break apart more of what the organization's doing, it ends up being a much smaller part than what one might think.
The conservation story of the wild turkey, referencing what you referenced, that it is unparalleled. I had an opportunity recently to help write an online course specifically for new turkey hunters,
Mm-hmm.
and that was what I wanted the first chapter to be about, was about the conservation success story of the wild turkey. I'd always heard that phrase kind of thrown around, this conservation success story, but I kind of dove in to do my research so I could write this section and give it justice. And I was blown away, that in such a short, I mean, if you think about, big T time, right? And
Wow.
just an incredibly short amount of time,
Yeah.
turkeys went from basically gone in the US. I mean, just very, 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 very small pockets here and there to just this widespread, species. And I think it's a outstanding testament to the power of quality conservation practices, of people standing behind the ideas that they care about and investing both their time and money and effort into complete or accomplishing. And wow, it blew me away. Really, really quite amazing. The way in which turkeys have come back within the United States. It's quite incredible. But I think if you would ask me the same question of like, what people may be missing on NWTF. I've had the opportunity
Mhm.
to work with you guys, and the thing that stands out to me the most will probably be the stories, right? That's the thing that I don't think people see. I had an opportunity. This was a number of years ago now. We were doing some sort of program with NWTF, but the part of that is I had to do some interviews um, at the Turkey convention. I think I did 8 or 10 interviews of people who lead a program called Wheeling Sportsman in their region. And Wheeling Sportsman is a program to help individuals who utilize wheelchairs to get out and go hunt. And I did these interviews, and they were probably each 15, 20 minutes long. And they were just absolutely, truly inspirational. There were not many people leaving with dry eyes. It was just folks that were so moved by their experiences, that were so moved by the human condition in which they were able to observe, right, of people overcoming challenges and finding success or finding independence. And I mean, it went from, okay, we're going to talk about taking individuals who utilize wheelchairs hunting to like true human connection stories.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely fascinating and humbling and inspiring and all those bucket words, right, that could
Yeah.
maybe be associated with just something that really kind of moves you. And uh, I think that's something that people don't necessarily connect to a turkey conservation organization. Is the opportunities and stories that they provide to individuals. So really,
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about the stories, I mean, when you're talking about the volunteers and event coordinators that are hosting these Mullen Sportsman's events, like you talked about, we have a couple other like legacy programs, as we call them. So we have Jake's, which is a youth-centered flagship program set, as well as we have Women in the Outdoors, and then we do kind of like a scattered palette of, I guess, other events that fall anywhere from like field to fork to conservation field days to family days, you name it. Like there's kind of an assortment. It really falls on the local community as to what that demand or that hope or that vision is. And that's kind of the beauty in those stories is they're all curated from passion, experience, opportunity, and where they're able to connect and offer stuff that they're so skilled at. Like there are some events that you go to and like you may have some of the national leading calling contest winners hosting an event. And so you're going to walk away there just absolutely mind boggled. Or you may go to an event and they'll teach you because they have a construction background and they can teach you how to build the best blind that you would ever imagine. And I definitely don't think I could ever make one myself until I walk into an event like that and they make it so simplistic because that's what they're good at. And so I think you get to see like everyone bring their individual touch to it. But I mean, when you go back to the stories too, is like thinking about it from a volunteer standpoint, these individuals majority have day jobs. And so this really is truly an extension of passion and just a dedication towards the impact that they've experienced, knowing how much that can have for someone else, to dedicate that much time. Because I know at the end of the day, when I clock out, I'm tired and I have things to do at home as well. And so to set aside that time and want to do something, even extending past, your day to day routines and dedicate towards something bigger like this. That's where you see those stories that are so inspirational because it stemmed from something internal. And I think that's, we talk a lot about working in this industry and how I know for me, when I thought about it, I was like, I know not every day am I going to walk into work and I'm going to feel like working. Like there's going to be days where you didn't sleep well because the baby was up or you're not feeling
Yeah.
super well. But that internal intrinsic motivation that's going to come out of that of like, I know why I'm doing what I'm doing, is what ultimately gets the beauty of the product to come out of your job. And hopefully in the same way, that's what you see in those stories is that intrinsic motivation, even whenever it's hard and they come home from work and it's like, oh man, but you see that reflection and like, no, but it's worth it. And their why is so prominent. Um, and yeah, it's literally every out of that 1,000 events, it's literally every single event you can ask that and you get so many answers as to their why, which is so beautiful.
And rare. right?
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah.
rare to have a very large group, right? In terms of NWTF of people that are all sort of motivated under a similar cause and it
Right.
shows what you can do when you have that sort of thing.
Right.
It really
Yeah.
is quite incredible. So I'm curious, we've kind of talked about what NWTF is and a bit about what you're doing, but what problems in conservation or hunting participation uh, is NWTF trying to solve right now?
That's I would definitely say there's a few different avenues, and obviously there's always going to be a couple of things. And one big thing is, I mean, regionally and where you're at in the nation, you're going to have different experiences and different things that come to the forefront. One of the biggest things, and one thing that falls heavily on my position that I get to be a part of, is that relevancy piece in my title or job title, rather would be, just advocating for the relevancy of hunting and the benefits that come along with that. One thing that we've had the privilege to be a part of in relation to the Council for Advanced Hunting and Shooting Sports, and we worked with some researchers alongside responsive management, and then also with a group called The Truth, which is a marketing firm that and designer that graphic designer, I guess, that works in conservation for the past decade or 2 decades, I guess, rather now. We created this marketing campaign called Hunt for Good, and that was really geared towards the benefits of hunting to try to send that out. Think like a Smokey the Bear or Got Milk campaigns that prominently got these really essential messages across that to the general public, just to create awareness and to try to introduce someone into the conversation. And so maybe some of your viewers have heard of it. That would be absolutely incredible. If you ever get feedback about that, that would just absolutely get me so pumped up. But we've been able to share that out, especially in the Northeast. We were able to secure a grant to share that out. And now we are about to move into the southeastern part of the U.S. to deploy that as well. And it's open marketing campaign to all of our partners, and we work with state agencies and we work with federal partners to deploy it and to share it out. And a lot of times it's organically shared I may, from a work perspective, may reach the same general population of hunters and those in the professional field. But if I send it out to my cousin or my brother, and then they share it out to their social media pages, then who they're reaching may be a completely different audience. And so that kind of idea of sharing the message and all that to essentially say Hunt for Good is like a list when you like visit the campaign materials that come along with it. It's just messaging that teaches you what are the benefits that surround hunting from a traditional to a very non-traditional perspective. From like hunt for the prep, hunt for the cookout, like these benefits of things that hunt for the family, like these different aspects that people connect to, because we've talked about it a couple of times now of just the motivations of why people hunt, or why they may be able to connect and understand like, okay, I may not want to hunt, but I understand why someone would want to hunt. Or if this is how they're connecting to it, then that makes a lot more sense to me. Like it's not always like the terminology of like the grip and grin, like that trophy kind of traditional mindset. Like that's not what we're necessarily trying to connect people to. It's truly to that experience and what they're connecting to with hunting. So that's definitely in the forefront in my mind of just that relevancy piece of how can we advocate. And that comes down to like we talk about of being at the position of being a voter, whether you're a hunter or not, understanding your why and why you're saying yes or no when you get to propose legislation. And that's something we're really passionate about and really involved with. And we see that really often. And I'm thankful we have a whole department that's much more well versed in that than I am, and understanding the jargon that goes into all things policy. But ultimately, at the heart of it, we just want to be able to continue that tradition and keep that opportunity alive, especially now having kids, like being able to see, like, what do I want for them in the future and for them to get to experience, whether or not it's something they want to do long term or not. Like, I want them to have that that opportunity. Um, but yeah, so I think that's a big piece. As far as from an R3 perspective, I mean, we talk a lot about recruitment, but um, there is a large turnover of, like, you may experience it once, but it's trying to figure out what are those next steps. Like, once someone has that initial introduction, what is it? What are those components that they're needing to stay connected or to feel confident enough to be able to try it out on their own, or how do they get connected with community? So I know internally with us, like, we always are trying to look for ways to get you connected to a local chapter or a local group that are meeting. One of my favorite examples of, like, next step community kind of getting people plugged in is we have a woman in the outdoors chapter in the Northeast, but it's in New Jersey. And one lady was so passionate about, like, hey, like, I'm in this group and, like, I want to find some other women to hunt with. And she got super passionate about, like, how do I connect to some of these other ladies? Because I know I can't be the only one. And now they have, like, year round, just all of these different events that, like, someone in their group is really good at baking sourdough. And so she offers a sourdough class, and it's like, anyone in the group chat or in the Facebook message group, like, if they want to come join, like, come learn how to sourdough. And then some ladies are really good at fishing, and some, like, meet up and kayak every, like, Tuesday night on during the summer. And so, like, there's all these different pieces that they found to connect. And obviously it's not just hunting, it's finding these things that it's like, hey, how do we bridge that gap between I'm learning, but I also just want to be connected and I want to have those people to ask questions to. And so we see those success stories, but that's obviously not everywhere. And so that's that conversation of how do we keep people involved or give them opportunities to stay involved if that's what they're looking for. Because I think a lot of that churn you see and that fall off is just like, I don't know what's next, or I don't know what's out there. And so just trying to create that continuation piece.
And we've talked on this podcast so many times about how important community is for
Mm-hmm.
all hunters, but also particularly for novice hunters, because that community is where you can find people that are interested in things that you're interested in that you can also learn from. And I had Tanaya Bethke on the show from the Council to Advance Hunting and Shooting Sports a couple episodes ago, and that was a big topic, right? Is the idea of about how community really kind of is the common bond that sits over the entire model that we use, right, in R3 efforts. And
Yeah.
so finding that is really critical. And the local chapters of NWTF are a fantastic resource. If that's something that you're interested in, if you're interested in turkey hunting, those local chapters, there's tons of them. They're everywhere. That you can get involved in and instantly kind of have a community of like-minded people that you can go and learn from and get to know, or learn how to bake some sourdough, apparently, go kayaking. But, all that is a part of it, right? Is in having community. That's really awesome. So kind of along that same vein, if you're, for listeners who are, kind of really in that spot of, I'm interested in hunting, I want to start hunting, but I really don't know where to start. So what types of programs or workshops or digital resources, whatever the case may be, are available right now through NWTF?
Yeah, so there's a few different routes I would recommend. I mean, you can always go and find on our events page anything local to your area, whether that be a local chapter that's hosting an event, and that could span from, we have mentored hunts all the way to Turkey 101s. We have volunteers that are also hosting their own hunter safety courses because they're instructors within their state. A lot of times you'll see that overlap because where that passion is, like, if they're hosting those opportunities, they want to be able to get them to that point to where they can get involved. So we see a lot of hunter safety courses that pair with some of our events. And we also, if it's just something to get involved of trying to figure out like what does it look like to get outdoors, and I want to understand the greater picture of how this connects back to conservation, we have conservation field days that, and from a youth perspective, something very similar to the conservation field days, we have our Jake's days, and those are definitely you can find those across the nation a lot. Those are probably one of our most popular events, just because you can have such a large event, bring in so many different vendors and partners from around the area that just get to pour into the youth. But usually it's more of a family oriented event where they encourage the whole family to come along, get to experience it, and see what that looks like for your family to kind of, get outdoors and find that your place there as a family, because we know it's fun to do it with others, and that may be your family or that may be connecting with others. And so, I mean, just going to the webpage and seeing if there is something local. And I would also caution of like, it's not always registered 6 months in advance when an event's happening. So feel free to reach out to the local coordinator. You can reach out to me and I'll try to get you connected with someone local. But also just trying to we work a lot with our state agencies and some of the partners in the state. And so any way that we can kind of connect between multiple different events to try to say like, hey, was turkey hunting not your thing? Well, here's something that we have that we know that's going on that's deer focused, or that maybe we'll get you out on a boat to go fishing, like anything that we can do just to give you the opportunity to learn and get that exposure. And sometimes that helps you to learn other dynamics and perspectives that will help you in the woods as well. And so, there's a lot of different routes to go. And that's one of my favorite things to talk about. So if there's a particular hurdle that feels like it can't be overcome, like we love a good challenge and would love to work to try to find a mitigated route and next step. So, I think that would be the big pieces.
So I'll post a link to all of those resources in the show notes. So if you're listening and you want to find how to find events in your area, check the show notes, and we'll have those there. So we're coming up on a long podcast here, so I have a few more questions, and we'll say goodbye. But I always think about this when the idea of kind of pitching events to novice hunters. If someone is nervous about walking into their first event alone, what advice would you give them?
It's a great question. Well, I would say, like, even from a perspective of like, no, you're not the only one. I think even from being a mentor, I still get nervous walking into an event because it's just meeting a new person. It's to a certain level, like you're being vulnerable. Like I'm hoping to teach you something and there's not a guarantee of success. And in the same way, you're coming in and saying, hey, I'm trying to learn something that I don't know the answers to. And I'm trying to, so I hope that would kind of open the idea of like, we're human too. We're trying, and also we were in that spot at some point too.
100%. Yeah.
But also I would say like, if it helps, bring a friend. Like a lot of times we see where it's like that introduces that opportunity for building that community. Like you don't just have to connect with someone who's already involved to build that community. A lot of times we see people come and they want to try it out, make it a girls' night. When I used to do the wing shooting courses, that was like literally like a 2 hour on a Wednesday night every other week in the summer kind of event. And we would host those in Michigan at a local range. And it was after hours. So it was so cool. So I think I'm going to kind of segue for a second and just say like a lot of these events, they're especially curated opportunities to where like you may get this like access to an opportunity to hunt on land or to go to a range after hours to where there's a little less pressure because you don't necessarily have all the pros around, if that makes sense. Like I remember when I first moved to Michigan and wanted to go to the range and freshen up on my archery, and the first time I like pulled up and I'm trying to figure out all the rules and what to do, and I'm like still shy. I'm a naturally more timid person in those situations, but there was all these people that would do it every day and it was a little intimidating. So going to an event like this, to have it a little set aside to where you kind of get to just like fill it out, have someone to ask questions to, you get that one-on-one help. They're there to do that. Hopefully that'll kind of take a little bit of the intimidation factor off of they're building this to be the safest environment possible. And that should be how it is, to be able to, have the training wheels on a little bit and then slowly learn how to take them off rather than throwing out to the opportunity where everyone's around that has their kind of systems and routines built in place, and you're trying to figure out how to mesh into that. So I think those are like the big factors I think about. But yeah, bringing with the wing shooting courses that we do, there was a group of girls or ladies that joined, and they fell in love with it. And so we got to set up a couple follow-up sessions that were kind of separate, and just got to kind of build from that. Because a lot of times that's the beauty of working with nonprofits and our events, is when we find something that's working really well, and it's something that's really bolstering and encouraging that next generation and those next wave of hunters and participants. If we see that it's something someone's really passionate about, our job and our passion is to try to continue to help make that happen. And so we got to create multiple courses, and then the ladies were like, okay, now we want to figure out what type of shotgun we would want to purchase to like get out in the field and try this out with a pheasant hunt. And then we saw a mentored pheasant hunt come out of that. And so it's just really cool to see how those opportunities continue to build. And so I would say, like, when you go into it, just stay open-minded, and know that like it's okay to be shy. Like, we don't expect you to come in and be like the eager one to answer every question. Usually we're not going to call you out, by name. We're going to try to walk you into it as slowly as you would like. And usually you can find that like one person that you can kind of connect with in the corner and start talking to, and then you build that confidence and camaraderie together. So that's the routes that definitely come to mind for me, at least from my experience personally.
Yeah, it's good to keep in mind that these programs are specifically designed for you, right? They're not made for expert hunters to come in and show off their fancy whatever skills, right? They're made for people just like you, coming in with zero skill. And so like there's there's no expectation of you coming in and knowing what you're doing, because you're not supposed to, right? Awesome. So my last question, and it's a bit of a leading question, but I just want to get it out there. Do you need to be an expert hunter to be a member of NWTF?
Oh, absolutely not. And I say that mainly because I do not personally feel like I am by any means an expert hunter, and
Me
I've been
either.
quite a while. So, thankfully that's not a prerequisite. Thankfully that's also not a prerequisite to be hired by NWTF either, because in the same way, I don't know that I would have answered that in my interview as like absolutely 100%. But, in the means of, we're always learning, and we're here to kind of brainstorm together.
Sure.
And share the stories of I literally get on a work call or a volunteer call almost every day, where we start off by talking about, especially right now, relevantly, that it is turkey season. You're sharing the stories of, are you hearing turkeys? Are you out in the field? Did you get out this weekend? And if you did you see anything? And a lot of times it's talking about like how we've messed up a couple different times, or how we aren't having success. So I think all of us, we're just a ragtag team, just trying to make it happen and have some fun in the meantime. So yeah, come on, join in. And yeah, by any means, you don't even have to know what a turkey looks like. We'll teach you.
Yeah, no, I've been a member of NWTF for a while now. It's one that I enjoy being a member of. It's a lot of cool perks, and there's some great magazines I always enjoy. The Turkey Call magazine. Yeah, it's a good time. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to take the time to film this episode with me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it too, Jay.
So, if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who's thinking about getting into hunting, or maybe even someone you'd like to go hunting with. I'd also love to hear from you. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please send them in at community@evolvinghunter.com. Any questions that you send in, we'll try our best to get them answered live on the show. And of course, as you heard today, our guests get to weigh in on their thoughts as well. If you want to follow along, please make sure that you're subscribed to the Evolving Hunter podcast. We're on Instagram and YouTube at Evolving Hunter Podcast, all one word. We've got a whole heck of a lot more conversations and hunting stories coming, along with practical conversations about skills, ethics, and what it takes to grow as a hunter. So please hang out with us, follow along. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep evolving. I really hope you enjoyed that episode of the Evolving Hunter podcast. One last thing before you go. If you're thinking about getting into hunting, before you go and buy gear or plan a hunt, you need the right foundation. That's why we're so excited to be partnered with CertifiedHunter.com. They have state-approved online hunter education that teaches real-world safety, ethics, and responsibility, not just test answers. If you want to start hunting the right way, head to CertifiedHunter.com/evolvinghunter and get certified today.